It started with a knock, faint, uncertain, like it didn't want to disturb anyone. I had just moved into that small apartment block 2 weeks ago, trying to rebuild my life after a broken engagement and a layoff that had left me hollow. My new place wasn't much cracked walls, a flickering hallway light, but it was quiet. Peaceful. That night, though, the knock changed everything. When I opened the door, she was standing there, an older woman, maybe in her early 40s, with wet hair clinging to her cheeks and two heavy grocery bags cutting into her hands. I recognized her from the floor below, always polite, always alone. Her name was Clara. "Sorry to bother you," she said, her voice gentle but strained. "The elevator's out again. I was wondering if you could help me carry these up?" I didn't even think twice. "Of course," I said, taking the bags from her. They were heavier than they looked, filled with canned food and cleaning supplies. As we climbed the narrow stairs, she laughed softly. "You must think I'm helpless," she said. "Not at all," I replied, though I noticed her hands trembling slightly. When we reached her door, she unlocked it and motioned me inside to drop the bags. Her apartment felt lonely. Clean, organized, but empty in a way that silence seems to scream. The walls were lined with photos, mostly of a man and a little boy. I tried not to stare, but she noticed anyway. "My husband passed 3 years ago," she said quietly. "And my son, he's in college now. Feels like I'm living in someone else's house." I murmured something awkward about being sorry, but she just smiled, forcing warmth she didn't feel. "Thank you for helping," she said, and I nodded, ready to leave. But before I could, she asked softly, "Would you like some tea?" "It's the least I can do." Something in her tone made it impossible to refuse. I sat across from her as the rain pattered against the window. We talked about the broken elevator, about the old landlord, about how quiet the neighborhood had become. But as the night deepened, her words grew slower, heavier. She spoke about losing her husband suddenly in a car crash, about the night she couldn't sleep because she swore she still heard him coming home. About the way the silence pressed down on her like a weight, and maybe because I was broken in my own way, I didn't leave. When I finally stood to go, she hesitated at the door, then whispered, almost pleadingly, "Stay a little longer." So I did. Chapter 1 ended with that, me sitting beside a woman I barely knew, sharing tea, grief, and silence. What began as a simple favor became something deeper. Not love, not yet, but connection. Something rare. Something fragile. Over the next few weeks, I found myself at her door more often. Sometimes I'd help with groceries again. Sometimes I'd fix something, a light bulb, a leaky faucet. Other times, we'd just talk. She'd tell me about her husband, how they used to dance in the kitchen when no one was watching. I'd tell her about losing my job, about how empty life felt when all your plans fall apart. We became, in some strange way, each other's cure for loneliness, but the world doesn't always understand that kind of connection. People started whispering in the building. An older widow and a younger man, it made good gossip. I tried to ignore it, but one afternoon, when I was fixing her garden fence, her sister showed up. "Clara," she said sharply, "what are you doing? He's young enough to be your son." I saw the hurt in Clara's eyes, not because her sister was wrong, but because she'd been reminded of it. That night, she didn't open her door when I knocked. For the first time in weeks, her apartment stayed dark. When she finally came to see me a few days later, she looked different, distant. "I think we should stop this," she said quietly. "People are talking. And I don't want to make things harder for you." I wanted to argue, but she was right. In a world that judges what it doesn't understand, we didn't stand a chance. So I nodded. And just like that, she closed the door, and a silence heavier than before returned. Days passed. Then weeks. I threw myself into finding work, trying to move forward. But every night, when I passed her door, I'd catch myself slowing down, listening. Hoping, and then one stormy evening, I saw an ambulance outside the building. My chest tightened as I ran up the stairs. Her door was open, and a neighbor murmured, "She fainted. Low blood pressure. They're taking her to the hospital." Without thinking, I followed. When she woke up in the hospital bed, pale but alive, she looked at me with tears in her eyes. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "I had to be," I said. "Because you once told me to stay a little longer. And I didn't know how to stop." Her tears spilled over. "You've done enough," she said softly. "You helped me remember what it's like to feel cared for again." I took her hand and smiled faintly. And you helped me remember what it's like to feel needed. We both knew what this was, something beautiful, but borrowed from time. A chapter that couldn't last forever, but would never truly fade. Months later, she moved away to live closer to her son. Before she left, she handed me a small envelope. Inside was a note that read, "You were never just a neighbor doing a favor. You were the reminder that even in broken hearts, kindness still blooms." I stood there in the empty hallway long after she was gone, the sound of the rain echoing the night we first met, and for the first time in a long while, I smiled, because sometimes, staying a little longer is all it takes to change someone's life.